Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. As you can see, I'm joined by Phil Holden this evening, our Deputy Leader. Welcome, Phil.
Good evening, Richard.
We've got lots to talk about, as usual. I've been out and about a bit. There's all sorts of things going on in the campaign. And we will welcome your comments as well. Do fire in your comments. And we will enjoy our hour, or as it's been more recently, a bit more than an hour together. We seem to run on a little bit. We're very happy to do. That's been good. Phil might have to disappear at some point during the show, but I will soldier on along alone when we get to that point. Now, what shall we start with this evening? Well, I think a good place to start is to say about our crowdfunder. I think last week I maybe said that it sort of it's been a bit disappointing. Well, it's livened up significantly since then. I think we're on £3,000 something in the crowdfunder, but donations directly to us by other means have been very substantial. So I think overall now our donations for the election campaign have probably been probably at least £8,000, maybe more. So that's good. We're all on budget, and the wheels are turning. Our election leaflets are in production, and that's all fixed up with Royal Mail. So I think it's about 750,000 of them will be winging their way through the letterboxes of our 16 constituencies before too long. So if you're lucky enough to live in one of those, keep your eye open. I think I've showed you this leaflet before as well, but we've got this one ready to go. So a little voting guide, which goes through 4 issues: repeal the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, protect the unborn, oppose assisted suicide, stop LGBT indoctrination in schools. And basically all the other parties, including Reform and ALBA, are all crosses and we're all ticks. So we'll try and get some of these through letterboxes as well. Just one more thing on the campaign front as well. This came in the post today. A morph suit.
Okay, there's some plan happening here. Is there?
Yeah, you might not be aware of that. It's a vague plan. It might come to pass, it might not. But it's one of our many ideas that we're considering.
I think I might remember that one.
Yeah, it's not scaling the Parliament and standing on top of it in the suit or anything, but it's it might be a fun little video we make at some point. So moving on to the news. Here we go. What's been? Well, this is hardly news, is it? This is just routine, really. An annual thing. I mean, Police Scotland like to prove their politicisation every now and again. So this was the post they put on X about their Progress Pride flag there. And that the Chief Constable seems to be falling over herself to say everything people with a sort of hard left ideology wanted to say, just to make it absolutely clear that she completely buys their philosophy, hook, line and sinker. And the interesting thing with this one, Phil, is they turn the replies off. You can't reply to it. I wonder why that would be. Do they not want to hear the views of the citizens, I wonder?
Yeah, I was at a recent meeting that, I won't say what the organisation was, but they have a pastoral department, and it was basically the pastoral department which all had their rainbow lanyards on. You could tell who they were. And it's I kind of find it interesting because in the past you would have thought pastoral, that would be a chaplaincy or something like that, But now it's really showing that this is, I guess, the religious side of stuff. Pastoral must go back to Jesus, where he said, "I'm the good shepherd." And now they've adopted that to say, we're shepherding your children into our ideology.
And the ultimate demonstration of that for me was at there was a Pride last year when they had all representative of all the Holyrood parties, and they had a moment of reflection to remember, I don't know, transgender people or something who died. And the chaplain substitutes were the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which I thought was a particular low. Anyway, that's the police just making it clear that they are not impartial, that they are biased and have adopted a particular controversial philosophy as their own. So our policies, of course, state we would sort that out, and that would be the end of that. Now, a couple of things here from the Catholic Herald. I think Mark Davis is a Catholic bishop. I think he's in England, actually, but we'll take it. We'll take the message in Scotland as well. And he's talking about the elections. Catholics must vote to stop the creeping culture of death. So how should Catholics vote to stop the creeping culture of death. Well, in terms of abortion, you basically got to vote for the Scottish Family Party unless there's another pro-life party that happens to be in your constituency. That would be that. What do you think of the idea there, like people who check up the personal opinions of their candidates?
I think really, that if it's somebody who's in a parliament, you should do it on their voting record and not on their personal opinion. I think by what we see in the Holyrood Parliament, that there's lots of people who, if you ask them privately what their opinion was, then they might have an opinion in line with your own. But in terms of how they vote or what they speak up about, not really.
Yeah. I mean, for any politician, if you ask them what they think and they know where you're coming from, it's obviously extremely tempting to say everything they possibly can to make it sound like, at the very least, they're very open to your opinion and would love to talk about it after the election, etc. Anyway, I think this is the same bishop. He continues. He says he wants marriage and its bedrock societal role to feature in the UK general election. It
does, doesn't it? Because we feature.
Yeah. So I thought, my translation of that.
He's talking about us.
Yeah, I've translated it into Scottish for him. It's Vote Scottish Family Party.
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to say. I think it's great that in the Catholic Herald, I think it's quite a widely read publication. It's great that they've got prominent church leaders speaking openly about these things. We're talking about wanting marriage to feature in the UK general election. I mean, that's quite forthright and specific, isn't it? Because that's something that the other parties pretty well completely ignore, apart from redefining it. So
yeah, I mean, we get slated for pro-marriage, don't we? In lots of places. It's like,
yeah. Okay, right. What else have we got? That's just a little photograph from some of the people at our Aberdeen event on Friday evening. Look at that photograph. There were a lot of young men there. And I was thinking, Phil, we maybe in the leadership team, we need to try and discuss strategies to try and reach some older people as well. Because we were disproportionately young men there. So it was great to see everyone there. Ewan in the background, our branch chairman. That's, holding the flag on the left, that's Graham, one of the candidates. At the other end of the flag is Dawn. She's one of our candidates as well. So, yeah, that was a nice event up in Aberdeen on Friday. Now, this was an interesting little snippet I came across. Now, I've spoken a few times about Humza Yousaf's affair. Humza Yousaf's affair, the journalists all know about, but for whatever reason, they haven't actually named him. They've run the story, but they haven't actually named him, and they haven't named her. But we all know who it is. So like Humza Yousaf's affair has basically been kept out of the official news, which I think's quite sinister in a sense. Politicians shouldn't have the ability to keep that sort of information secret from the public. But it seems like Humza Yousaf, one way or another, or the SNP, one way or another, managed it. And this is something that sounds similar from Westminster about a very prominent Labour politician. Allegedly had an affair, maybe fathered a child. Again, apparently it's the talk of the town among the journalists at Westminster, but nothing's come out. Now, I've normally said with these things, I'm sure things don't get covered up like this in Westminster. But I do find it very frustrating when we're aware of these things going on and they are kept out of the public domain. I think it's really important for people to know. If people are deciding who to vote for, or who they think should lead the country, I think the sort of insight into their character is of critical importance. So, yeah, maybe something will come out. Maybe someone's saving something for later in the campaign. We shall see. Right, what else has been happening? Right, David Payton, I don't remember him. He was on the live stream a while ago. He's an academic. He seems to have a carte blanche to research whatever he feels like, or whatever fits his personal interests. And he's just reiterating, well, they're reporting his research here, that no evidence that sex education has any impact on teenage pregnancy rates or levels of STIs. Because in Scotland, it gets trotted out. It's a factoid. It just gets trotted out repeatedly. Everyone knows the evidence shows that what you need is the sort of vulgar and corrupting sex education that we're doing, because the evidence shows that that's what really makes a positive difference.
I think last year's teenage abortions, I don't know if it was teenage, but at the youngest bracket, I think it might have been under 18, was up by 7%, something like that. So clearly the sex education not having an effect there in a positive way.
Yeah. But the mindset, of course, as ever in Scottish education, as things get worse, the solution is always we need to go further in the direction we're going. That's always the prescription. And the context of this was this. I don't know if you saw the story. It was reported in the news quite widely.
Yeah, I saw that.
Some teachers saying that 14-year-olds have been asking the teachers how to choke girls during sex. And then the BBC are reporting it like as a shock horror story. Then you think, what's the BBC's line in terms of encouraging like unorthodox, risque sexual activity? Well, they're pretty open. And they'll give that something a push. Channel 4, are even worse about it. So on the one hand, these people throw up their arms in horror and say, oh, isn't it terrible what young people are thinking about, what they're wanting to do. But on the other hand, they're publishing material and airing opinions that are pushing in exactly that direction. It's extremely, extremely hypocritical. Hello, John. The Catholic Bishop's letter, I saw that at the Scottish election. It was really good. Really, really good. And the Scottish Family Party was top of the list too, which didn't mean they were first choice. But anyway, we were top of their table, and that was much appreciated. I think in every political party, men are more numerous than women. And I think when it comes to being candidates, I think men in general tend to be more willing. We find that with the Family Party, men in general are more willing to do that. So what the other parties do is they start trying to rig the system, basically have all women shortlisted, this sort of thing. But we're not much for that. But we certainly encourage everyone to be a candidate and to take on responsibilities within the party. That's Stephen Welsh. He's our candidate in Western Isles for the general election, and is also our candidate in the Harris by-election. There's a council by-election going on in Harris, and Stephen had agreed to stand in that. So he submitted his papers, and that was all underway. Then a general election was called. So he's now a double candidate. So I was just been up in the Western Isles with him. We had a little launch event in Stornoway for the general election campaign, and a little event in Tarbert as well in Harris. And he's been going around knocking on doors. It's been really good. Stephen is really on the ball. He's a retired psychiatrist who worked in the Western Isles for a long time, and he's very personable. So he's going around meeting lots of people and other family party activists over there, helping him out as well. So let's hope that Stephen does well. I think however many votes you get, he will win friends and increase awareness for the family party. But let's hope the votes go well. In the council by-election, it was not impossible that he might have been the only candidate, because that sometimes happens in the Western Isles. But there is one other candidate
who's that?
Standing as an independent.
Yeah.
The other candidate is from Harris. Stephen's from Stornoway, so a bit further away. So I think the other candidate is known within the area a little bit, and he's an independent, which tends to be the culture in the Western Isles. But Stephen's pitch is to encourage people to lift their eyes a little bit higher. Okay, we need to sort out the local issues, but also let's look at influencing the council in general. Let's look at steps towards influencing the whole of Scotland, taking some of the values in the Western Isles to the rest of Scotland. So, I had a chess tournament with Stephen as well. He plays a bit of chess. It was a draw. We each won one and we drew one.
Yeah.
But the one we drew was because I had, I was up on pieces, but slightly insufficient material. So on balance, I'm going to claim a points victory. Stephen can object. It's right. What else? There's a rule for counter protesters when we have an event. The further you are into a rural area, the more further you are from urban centres, the more likely you are to get a counter protester or two outside the event. That's a very interesting rule, but it definitely applies. Dingwall, Tarbert, Kirkwall, to name but three places where we've had counter-protesters. Stornoway as well. So this lady came with this sign, which I didn't understand. Have a stab at that, Phil.
No, what's the meaning of it? What's she getting at?
Well, I asked her, and she wouldn't speak to me.
Hmm.
So it's quite difficult to discern. I'm guessing the criminalizing. I wondered if maybe she's had an abortion. That would be a guess. That's the only thing I could think about. But how we aim to silence anyone, I didn't understand. Didn't understand that at all. But it's interesting when you see people who've done their DIY placards. They often don't make sense, or it's total perverse misrepresentation of our policies. It's quite interesting to see what people come up with. But that was that was in Tarbert, right out in one of the most rural parts of Scotland. That's what you find. It was interesting in the meeting. One of the locals there said, it was in a community hall. He said, if you pack this hall out with local people and outlined your policies, he said probably most of the people would be completely on board. They'd completely agree. But for some strange reason, he said, for some incomprehensible reason, they then go and vote for Labour or the SNP in the election. So that's what we're up against. It was interesting to hear that. It was quite ironic. She was complaining about being silenced, but wouldn't have a little chat to me to explain what it was all about. I thought the other thing quite interesting that, I think in the Western Isles in general, there's a lot of conservative churches, theologically conservative churches. So there's a lot of churches that would have values that would align with quite a lot of the policies of the family party. I thought it was quite interesting that when we show up, this lady's moved to come and protest. But these churches are having services every Sunday all around her. And it's probably never crossed her mind that she should go and protest against those or take any action against those. That's quite interesting. My theory is that she maybe doesn't quite know what they think, or they've never said it, or she's never heard what they've said.
Number two might be quite possible, but
yeah. I mean, if you were a leader of a church in that area, how would you take that? Would you take it as a little bit? That's what they're the things we stand for, and yet they don't bother targeting us because they either don't know we stand for them, or they're happy that we're quiet. So it's a way of policing discussion, isn't it? Like if someone in this area dares say the wrong thing, we're going to have a go at them. We're going to protest. We're going to try to shut them up because we don't want this sort of thing on our patch. But when it comes to the local churches, it's as though they feel like, do they feel like they've already won? They've already kept them quiet? I don't know. It was just an interesting thought there. I know a church in the, again, in the countryside, again, not in the city, more in a more rural area, where they've been plagued by LGBT protesters at their services, placards, criticizing the minister or whatever, who's not a sort of fire and brimstone person addressing these issues on a weekly basis. Far from it. But they've just got it into their head that he's someone who believes the wrong thing. So they're after him. Right, what else have we? Have you heard any of these, Phil? Yes, as a candidate in an election, you get a string of emails from people asking you to commit to their cause.
Yes, I've had a few. So I had one on freedom of speech, and that was basically, can you commit to these 5 things? And I could happily commit to those things.
Yeah, I've had that one as well. Yeah.
I think interestingly, they didn't have, they covered quite a few issues, like on, a woman being an adult human female and these kind of things, but they didn't speak up at all on buffer zones and things like that. And I would have kind of expected that to be in there in the midst of these issues.
Yeah, I think buffer zones are a little bit borderline for cultural conservatives. shall we put it? Because they might see that the whole pro-life issue, that they're a bit wary of that. They don't want to divide their audience or their support. I've actually got that one later. We can look at that one later, actually. I think I've got it. I mean, one of the ones I remember the last election as well. I've got loads of this from this organization. You probably had some as well. It's Right to Life, the pro-life organization. They're really good, great. So we get emails from them. They must have some automated system where you put your postcode in or something in it. You can fire off an email. So it says, "Dear me, dear me, dear Richard Lucas, I'm a constituent in Edinburgh Southwest. I'm asking you to sign the Both Lives Pledge, confirming that if elected as an MP, you would commit to stop discrimination against baby girls by supporting a law to clarify that sex-selective abortion is illegal." I'm not sure why you need a law to clarify the law.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, it's already illegal, sex-selective abortion. So I'm not sure why you need a law to clarify that something's illegal. Yeah, we'll be dead against that. Bring UK law closer to laws in the majority of EU countries by voting to lower the gestational time limit for abortion. Well, yes, that's a very modest proposal. We would want to go the whole hog on that, but yeah, okay. Support women in the workplace by backing policies designed to stop pregnancy and maternity discrimination. What do you think that could be?
Isn't there already a law there to say that
there isn't now. The
basically
Equality Act.
if you get rid of somebody because they're pregnant, or you think they might get pregnant, then that would be illegal?
Yes, I thought there was. Yeah. Yes, I'm not quite sure what that means. There.
Yeah.
Interesting one. Anyway, so you can sign the pledge. So what I did in the last election is everyone who emailed from this organization, I replied to them sending our policy, our pro-life policy, and said, there's no need to ask me my opinions. Here it all is. It's in our policies. Would you like to join the Scottish Family Party? Would you like to come and help with our campaigning in the local area? And some people did. So we got some recruits from it. There's quite a contrast between the two approaches, isn't it? I mean, in my constituency, I've had about 5 of these. So that's quite a...
Hamish has added this in. He says, sex-selective abortion is indeed illegal, but CPS has, I understand, ruled that it would not be in the public interest to pursue such a case.
Okay, that's interesting.
But would clarifying the law change that?
Yeah,
that many kind of legal organisations are very partisan in what they pursue.
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of laws. I mean, the law is useless if no one will enforce it for you.
Yeah.
I've had several cases where that's quite frustrating, where something is clearly a crime, but that's pointless. It's useless if the police are not going to do anything about it. Okay. Yeah, so it's quite interesting, the different approach. So I thought all these people in my constituency very concerned to get a pro-life MP. Well, I hope some of them might express their desire for a pro-life MP by supporting my campaign and getting on board with the Scottish Family Party. So we shall see. That's what happened last time with this. This is the one you mentioned earlier as well, a free speech organisation. We're in touch. Do you agree that the police should stop placing persons on hate registers who've committed no crime? So I said yes, and I've got personal experience of that. I'm on one myself. Do you agree that parents and psychotherapists should be free to advise young persons not to change sex, gender? So that's conversion therapy. Yes. Now, what I would like in there is an equivalent question to do with sexuality as well. Because I think there's a lot of people now who say, oh, yes, the transgender, we don't want a conversion therapy ban for transgender. Yeah, obviously with sexuality, that's reasonable. I think that's going to be the line of probably the Conservatives in the Scottish Parliament, I would guess. So I'd want to add that. Do you believe it's wrong for teachers to tell kids that Britain is structurally racist? Yes, I do.
I believe that, but I don't think that has anything to do with free speech, does it? Here, they're arguing something they want not to be said or not to be taught, and it's inappropriate for that to be taught in schools. But it doesn't go under the heading of freedom of speech.
Yeah, good point, actually. Good point.
And there was another one under there as well that was basically about transgenderism, being taught in schools and things like that. And I thought, that's your opinion, but it doesn't come under free speech, because what you're saying is that you shouldn't teach on this. And I think that there's there are certain things. You've got a curriculum in schools, and I think teachers do want a bit of freedom to speak about some areas of personal interest and things like that. But I think our issue is that this is on the curriculum, basically. So everyone is teaching it. And we want it off the curriculum because we don't think it's appropriate. But we don't mind people speaking about it in their own free time and things like that.
Yeah, good point. Do you agree that an official state definition of Islamophobia will curtail our right to be critical of a religion? Most likely. That's a hypothetical question.
Yeah,
but it's easy to. I've seen some of the proposed definitions of Islamophobia, and they are very, they're too broad. I would suggest. Do you agree that everyone should have freedom to speak their mind that includes the right to offend and hold controversial views? Again, that's very broad. I suppose that right means free from legal redress. What's your opinion about something like, in a lot of parts of Europe, like Holocaust denial is a crime? But it's not here, is it?
Yeah. So I think freedom of speech it's quite a blurry issue in some ways, because some people will say things like pornography and things like that. And, so say somebody's talking about literature, which is to do with pedophilia or something like that. Should that be legal or not? Should bomb making stuff be legal to distribute and things like that? So I think probably everyone would say that there's some limits there, and I think really we want to promote good speech, basically, and have freedom of speech, which is essential for debate.
I think a lot of people do to have a very black and white view on freedom of speech. I mean, for example, people representing the family party will say you cannot say these things because it damages our reputation. It's not the way we want to present ourselves. And sometimes people will naively say, I thought you were stood up for freedom of speech. So we're not saying you should be locked up for it. We're not saying it should be a crime. It's just, you can't say anything you like in any context on behalf of any organization and expect that to be fine. Right, comment from the Mr. Brown, not to be confused with all those other Mr. Browns. This is from the Mr. Brown. I suspect churches don't face a lot of public protest because people don't feel threatened by them. Churches tend to keep to themselves and don't get involved with politics. The SFB, however. Yes. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's got me thinking that one. I'm going to think a bit more about that.
I mean, I feel that these are real moral issues, though. Like, I feel when I read preachers from the past, when I read, Whitfield, or I look at John the Baptist or things like that, then they would be the kind of people that would address these issues head on. They looked to what the ills were of their day and they spoke straight into them. And I just feel we're a long way from that. I feel that the churches often very much want to be accepting of whoever's accusing them of being bad. The sort of line from the LGBT community is basically, the church has mistreated us so much. I think I've been in the church and they've never spoken on LGBT. They've never, I've been in so many churches and they've sort of avoided the topic and trod very lightly on that. And you look at Jesus' teaching and he's very, very black and white. He talks about fire falling on Sodom and Gomorrah and things like that. And he says, that's what happened, and so I think that churches are a kind of a long way from, where the Bible drew lines and things, and things that people said.
I think some churches. I mean, let's imagine, the Free Presbyterian Church in Harris The preacher delivers a sermon and he talks about some of these issues. I think the people around that, they wouldn't know. No one would know. Doesn't go well. It might go online, but no one's monitoring it. No one. But then the family party, that's something novel. That's worth investigating. Let's see what they're all about. And then they're out. This one was quite funny, in a sense. But I've made videos about climate change education in Scotland because I think it's absolutely out of control.
Okay.
Now, whatever you think about climate change, just the emphasis on it in schools and the way that a lot of children are made very anxious, unnecessarily anxious about it. I've seen videos of kids where they're saying, they're not expecting to grow into adulthood because they're expecting to be burnt up before then. And it's just like wall-to-wall emphasis across subjects. It's pretty extreme. So I got this email from someone asking me to commit to improving climate education in the UK. They're saying we want even more of it. He just thinks there's not enough teaching on the topic. So I don't know whether I'll reply to that one or just say I don't quite see the need here in Scotland. So.
I think if you follow what's happening in AI and the researchers that are building the top AIs and how unsure they are of what the result is of what they're building, the existential threat from that, they're saying like 1 to 3 years or something to have AI which is on a par with like PhD scientists, and they're not sure quite how to control these things and things like that. Don't really understand how it works. And these are the people they're saying like there's an existential risk there, and there's no alarmism. There's no big alarmism about that compared to global warming and things like that. But the threat is so much closer and so much nearer. So I find that
interesting. On the subject of AI, I'm going to show you a little video now, a little humorous interlude. This is a video of an MSP speaking in the Parliament. And when I first watched it, my first thought was, that's an AI fake.
Yeah.
Surely no one would actually say that. That's an AI fake. But it's actually real. This Green MSP did actually say this in the Parliament. Are you ready for this pearl of wisdom? Here we go.
Road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men, who are the main beneficiaries of reducing journey times between cities. Road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men, who are the main beneficiaries of reducing journey times between cities.
How about that then?
Where's that?
That's in the Scottish Parliament. That's Green MSP.
Yeah.
So her point is we shouldn't be spending money improving roads, because improving roads, it's like basically roads are racist because they mainly benefit wealthy white men.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't build them. I mean, I don't know, words fail me. Could you imagine being in the mindset though when you're looking at an issue like roads and you come from it from the lens of it's racist and sexist?
Wouldn't want that to happen. Yeah.
I mean, is she saying it? She doesn't even say it's disproportionately men or white men. She just says many of the people who benefit from it. I mean, it's scary.
What's she
Glasgow
saying
City
about
Council,
women in driving? That sounds like a very sexist remark, doesn't it?
It could be, yes. She's assuming that women don't drive, or it's just too bizarre for words. But Maggie Chapman has a record of saying some very, very unusual things, and I think that's another example of it. I mean, it seemed like the background noise in the Parliament did almost sound like a bit of laughter. I don't know. Just
was it
staggering.
White men? She said as well. Was it specifically white men? Yeah.
Yeah, rich white men.
Rich white men.
Okay. I mean, imagine that perspective has been taken into every issue that she looks at.
Yeah.
She's coming to it from that perspective. I mean, wow. I guess they're going to find out that women use pavements more than men. So we're going to increase the pavement budget and decrease the. Well, what about like black men? What do they tend to do? Do they tend to go on the train? I don't know. So anyway, quite entertaining, that little one. Let's go back to our slides. Right, this is a growing story in Glasgow. I've mentioned this before, but Glasgow basically is, well, not bankrupt would be an exaggeration, but they've got major financial problems. So they're having to reduce the number of teachers very drastically. And as I said before, the reason for this financial problem is the equal pay claim, which cost them the best part of £1 billion and has absolutely shot their finances. And so in order to just break even, they're having to fire 450, up to 450 teachers are going to lose their jobs because of this equal pay claim. And in the whole of the parliament, there won't be a single person who will say, maybe these equal pay claims are not good. Maybe we've got a problem here. Maybe this is not fair. That our children's education is being severely negatively influenced because of these spurious equal pay claims, but no one will say it. No one dares say it or think. I don't know if they think it and don't say it. I don't know. But I find it just infuriating because the politicians who are the first to be saying, "Oh, teacher cuts, that's a really terrible thing." But the Labour Party is saying it's terrible. The SNP is saying it's Labour's fault because it's from when they were in power. The Conservatives are sort of just criticising the council about it. But no one will recognise the elephant in the room. This is basically the cost of feminist ideology. So it starts in a university seminar room and it ends up with your council heading towards bankruptcy and 450 teachers losing their jobs, which I think is a bit of a problem. But I seem quite a lone voice in that regard.
And from the photo, the majority of the people losing their jobs look like they'd be women.
Yes. It will be. Yeah, I mean, teachers in Scotland are 77% women. So I'd assume that's a very good point. So this will be doing a lot of women out of jobs. So just to recap the story. So decades ago, a lot of ladies went to look at jobs at the council. They looked at the available jobs. They said, do I want to be a grave digger, working out in the cold and wet, in the mud? No, I don't fancy that. I think what I'll do, I'll be a school cleaner instead. And then they work for 30 years. Then at the end of 30 years, they then say, with the aid of a clever lawyer, I haven't been paid as much as that grave digger working outside in the cold. That's not fair. I should have been paid the same as the grave diggers. And so they win the legal case and then get compensated and they receive like the difference in pay backdated for decades and decades. Because people who chose to do a job that they chose not to do got paid more than them. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, absolutely crazy. But rather than recognizing that there's something crazy going on, the politicians in Hollywood would rather pay the price of 450 teachers, I say mainly women, losing their jobs. It's quite remarkable. Now this is really intriguing, isn't it? Douglas Ross standing down. What is going on here? I don't understand it. Even if you were going to stand down after the election, why ever do you announce that in the middle of the election campaign? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. So he's going to keep on as an MP, but he said if he gets re-elected, which I think he's very hopeful of being elected, it's a different constituency. He's very hopeful of being elected again as an MP. He will stand down as an MSP and he's going to resign as leader of the Scottish Conservatives. But that just plunges as it says there, plunges their whole campaign into chaos. So whatever is he doing? So why is he announced it now? I cannot understand. People have suggested it's because there's a bad news story about to break about him and his expenses. But I wonder whether or not he wants to get into Westminster when the Conservatives have only got 50 MPs left. He maybe fancies his chance of becoming the leader of the UK Conservatives. And who knows, maybe he's got the idea he's going to be the Prime Minister in however many years.
I think that'll take a long time.
Yeah, a long
to
time,
get back. I can't see that happening anytime soon.
So there's a mystery there. I feel like we haven't got all the pieces of the jigsaw to explain what's happening. But It's interesting how the Conservatives seem to be holding their own in Scotland. Looks like the constituencies they hold, that they might well hold them.
Yeah.
It just shows the effect of the, people call it Ulsterisation, don't they? It's like independence is top of the agenda. Independence or unionism is so dominates politics. Doesn't matter how hopeless the Conservatives are. Doesn't matter how hopeless the SNP are. There's a very substantial proportion of the electorate who are going to vote for them in any case, because all that matters is nationalism or unionism. I think the Conservatives benefit from that.
And so he's saying that only if he wins, he's going to resign, or?
In terms of resigning as an MSP, yes. In terms of resigning as party leader, that's a good question. I'm not certain about that. I was thinking he was saying he was going to stand down regardless, but maybe it's only if he wins. Because
I think that would not go down well if you say I'm going to stay on if I lose, basically.
Yeah. I mean, just really, really bizarre. Yeah. So there's more to come out on that story a bit. Let's just wait. Right. When's our party political broadcast? You know about that, Phil. When's it? Is it 19th and 20th?
Yeah, 19th and 20th of June. Lots of work to do on it. Challenging to meet the specification for it as well. So I'd say if you're a praying person, pray. But I think it's going to be a good broadcast. If you're campaigning for us, then get out on the streets in the run up to that, so people have seen a flag or seen a board or something like that. It's important to make an impression on people. So the video will have the flag in there, and so if they see the flag and they've seen it on the street or something like that, then that's good, because they'll recognize it when they see it on the ballot paper. So some of those things are quite important.
While we're on the topic of television, I went over to the BBC today to do an interview, which has probably aired already. It's the Leaders' Debate Night, Scottish Leaders' Debate. So it's the leaders of the parties in the Scottish Parliament having a debate for the general election. The Family Party weren't invited, which I'm not complaining about, because Alba are not there, Reform are not there, etc. But what they do is they invite the other parties to just do a very short interview. They might air a couple of minutes of it before the main debate. So I went along today to do it. It was the most aggressive and hostile interview I've ever had from anyone. I will tell you about it. Everyone at the BBC is always very charming. I bought in the car park, by the way. Quite noticeable that the standard of cars is pretty high. There's a lot of decent salaries in the BBC, I can tell you. Anyways, so you go in there. They're all very nice. The first question was, tell us what's front and centre of your policies for this election, and tell us something you think needs to bring into the debate that's been left out. So, that's a great question. So I said, family centre our policies. What's been left out? I said, just before the general election, the Westminster Parliament was scheduled to have a vote on decriminalisation of abortion, allowing killing of unborn children right up to birth, grave moral evil. And I guarantee in the debate tonight, no one's going to have anything to say about it, but we think this is a really grave issue. So he then said, yeah, but some people don't like your tactics. I said, well, what do you mean, our tactics? He said, like going and, I can't remember the word, like picketing abortion clinics. I said, well, the Scottish Family Party doesn't do that. We're a political party. But I said, my wife, Mary, organises the vigil in Edinburgh, and I have been to that. Then he started doing so why do you intimidate women? All this. So I answered, I gave the example of, a placard, ask me about my abortion, another one, we can help or whatever. So we finished with that one. Then he basically went through like the Wikipedia hit piece catalogue. So he did, you've got links to fascist parties. I mean, really, do they genuinely believe that? So I explained about the person that they've got in mind. I said that person used to be in the Family Party. We had a chat. I explained that white nationalism was not part of our policies. That was not a party where, we're not going to go down that line. So he decided to leave and then got involved in another party and maybe started a new party or whatever. So that's the story there. How does that make us linked to fascists then? But with each of these things, no, just as I was getting towards the end of my explanation, he would interrupt with the next one. Like he didn't really want to listen to the answers. He just wanted to get the next bullet fired. He said about Niall and his heckling of Humza Yousaf, which I was, I would rather not to have had to answer about that. But, I've got answers I could give about that. And then he got to his last question. He said something like, you say you're for uniting society. I can't remember his words exactly. These might not be the exact words, but it's something like, so why is it that you hate LGBT people? You're against children's rights, I think he said. You're against women's equality. And there's something else as well. Like 4 things all in one question. So I said, whoa, hang on a minute. What was the first one again? So he said the first one. So I responded to the first one. I'm not sure I even got to the second one. But certainly before I was halfway through, he said, okay, we need to finish there. That's it. So basically slings 4 bits of mud, 4 allegations, and then doesn't give you time to respond to them. And just right now, that's it. That's what we're going to broadcast. So he said, you're against women's equality. And I had no chance to reply to that.
Can you complain to that because of the fairness and election stuff? That basically we have been treated fairly well in the past, I think.
We have
around election time because there's very strict guidelines that the BBC have, and maybe there's a case for saying.
Yeah, one thing I'll do, I'll watch the other ones
to address that basically.
Yeah, I'll see how he treats the other party leaders that have this little slot. If he's absolutely on the warpath with every one of them,
yeah,
like when the Reform Scotland leader's on, if they've got one, I don't think they've got a Scottish leader, but anyway, whoever they've got from Reform, if he starts off by saying you're racist, aren't you? Then I think, okay, well, maybe that's his style.
Yeah, but he might for Reform, and then he might not. The Greens might come on, and so I think the accusation from the debate for the Westminster BBC one is that basically the BBC for the answers from Farage always showed someone scowling and while you hear loads of cheers from the audience, and then the Greens come on and it's like,
But I think what they'll always say within, I think tough interviews, but I think throwing 4 things at you and not giving you a chance to reply to them, that's not on.
They're
There's
taking
no
your time when
purpose.
they do that. Basically, they're saying, "Here, we're having you on, and we're not going to give you a chance to answer, but we're going to use up the time that's allocated to you to actually just
to make our points,
insult you."
Yeah.
To put across our point, and not give you a chance to answer, and that's not fair.
I mean, it would be like if they had, let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say they had John Swinney on, would they be saying the equivalent for John Swinney would be, why do you want to keep killing unborn children? That would be the equivalent tone and the equivalent level of aggression and hostility applied to a pro-abortion candidate or party. Well, they would never dream of it, because as far as they're concerned, if you've got the right views on these topics, they don't even bother asking you a question about them. They'll just ignore them. They'll go on to ask you about, how much are you going to, how many nurses you're going to pay for the NHS or whatever. But if you've got the wrong views on those things, then they're at you. They're after you. I mean, this is like linked to a fascist party as well. I mean, are they really claiming there's any credibility in that? I mean, it's so tenuous and ludicrous. They don't believe
like
that's
membership,
real.
anyone can become a member. You just fill out the form.
Yeah.
When I become a member, become a member. There's not. It's an automated process.
Yeah.
And it helps meet our expenses.
But this is someone who left the party having had a conversation with me where I said, right, that's not what we're about. That this is, and he's all right. Okay, well, I'm going then. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's very, very frustrating. So I might complain. I'll see what the others like, but I'll see what they're only going to take a couple of minutes from about 5 minutes. If they use the question where he slings 4 things, 4 lots of mud, spadefuls of mud, and doesn't give me a chance to answer, then I think that might be grounds for a complaint. When it comes to his whole manner was so aggressive and hostile. But you can't pin that down. That's all pretty subjective.
No, like I do feel like in the context of a debate, that if he's essentially taking the he realizes that you've no one to fight against you, and in a debate that's what the other parties would be getting. His accusations and mud slung at them and things like that. He might feel that's his job to do.
Yeah. I felt he was getting more and more irritated because he started off. The early question, gave me chance to respond. Then as time went on, he was becoming more and more impatient.
Yeah.
And more aggressive to interrupt.
And
so we'll see what they use.
Backfires though, doesn't it? That if we answer in a reasonable way, and the person interviewing, their kind of mask drops a bit.
Yeah. I think on reflection, what I might have liked to have said when he said about it wasn't an important issue, I said about they'd voted on decriminalisation of abortion up to full term, grave moral evil. He then went straight to buffer zones. I maybe should have said at that point, right, that's interesting, isn't it? I've just spoken about the killing of unborn children right up to birth, and you immediately leave that issue. You're not interested in that issue. You immediately want to go on to a peripheral issue. But then that would have been a good point to make. But anyway.
And I think just in terms of this campaign, to say that the pro-life issue is one that we'll be really speaking up on. That this is an issue that people would say was our most controversial, probably, statement. Our most controversial point that we stand on. And they say, well, I'd vote for you sometimes if it wasn't for this thing. But we believe it's so important that unborn lives being taken away. These are human beings. They're being killed. Over 250,000 in England and Wales, and we're standing in the Westminster election. 16,000 in Scotland, up 19% on the previous year. Just, these are absolutely incredible numbers. It's the job. When it comes to justice, the strong speak up for the weak. And, that's what Parliament is for being a voice for constituency and, the people in a region. And those that are killed at this age, they need someone speaking up for them. And that's what we're there to do. And if you stand on that issue, there's nobody else like the Scottish Family Party who will stand up. So those in parties won't stand up because of the whip. And the ones that do, like the one that does in Scotland, if you vote for his party, then you're voting for more and more abortion. So if it's an issue you stand on, vote for us. But raise your voice in this election and start making the argument on this.
The channel is going to be on BBC and STV, just once on each. Our party election broadcast. We're thinking our party election broadcast might cause quite a stir. We'll see. It's very hard to predict, but let's see. Right, interesting statistic. 30% of women who have an abortion do so because someone else wants them to, according to the Guttmacher Institute. Yeah, I've heard similar statistics. That's very concerning.
I think that's so significant when it comes to the buffer zones, because I think in England the law is stated trying to influence somebody within the vicinity.
In Scotland, influence is the crime.
Influence within the vicinity of an abortion clinic. And obviously influence has been happening elsewhere, which has been to get a desired outcome. And that's often going to be from family or a boyfriend to say, it would just be so much simpler if this life were gone and we forgot about it. We forgot it ever happened. And there's nobody speaking up on that pressure. There's nobody saying this has to be made illegal. And so it's not really about, pressure being put on women, because if that was the issue, then the law would be looking at both sides of this. But the law is looking only at one side of it. Yeah,
good point. Challenge the interviewer's attitude. It's always interesting in an interview. I think it's quite a risky step. To complain at the interviewer,
because you could have a debate about attitudes that doesn't get very far.
It can come across all wrong. I was saying tonight's interview, I was starting to think that towards the end, I was starting to think I'm going to say something about this, but it was over before. It was over in 5 minutes. So we'll see. We'll see what they publish. Take it from there. Anyway, the Douglas Ross mystery. Events coming up. Friday, that's the end of this week, isn't it? Yeah, Friday this week, we've got a meeting in Kilmarnock. Wednesday next week, a meeting in Paisley. Venue will pop up on social media. I can't remember what that's going to be, but Kilmarnock this Friday. Well, this was quite a nice little post. I saw next. If masculinity were truly toxic, then kids growing up without fathers would presumably be better off than those who have them.
Yeah.
But they're not. So, yeah, well done, Noella, or however you say it. That was quite nicely put. Now, this is a Christian Concern, the campaigning group. It seems like, I assume, they're going to do a series of little videos analysing the manifestos of the different parties. And they had one about the Lib Dems. To say the least, it was just a catalogue of complaints saying that that they disagree with them on a lot of core issues. But interesting was the Lib Dems say they want to increase maternity pay. And the Christian Concern was saying, yeah, that's good. Which I'm sort of with that. But our policy, I think, makes an important distinction, because currently maternity pay is paid through the employer. So for example, let's say a woman is working. She's been working for a couple of years. She gets pregnant, has a baby, then she gets maternity pay, and the state pays it. The government pays it, but the government pays it through the employer. Okay, so she gets maternity pay. Let's say instead a woman has had one baby 1 year, another one 18 months later, another one 18 months later, another one 18 months later, say. And let's say in between those, she didn't play the game of stringing the employer right by like for going back to work for 2 weeks in between them, just to keep the, or whatever, to keep something ticking over. So she's basically stopped working because she's a full-time mum for the next however many years. So she's not working, she's having these babies. What maternity pay does she get? Well, zero. You only get maternity pay if you used to be working just before the baby was born. Now, what possible justification could there be for that? That's just wrong, isn't it? I mean, I can't think of any possible way to explain that that's fair. So we say maternity pay should be available to mothers, not mothers who had a job just before the baby was born. So we added that to our policy booklet not too long ago, but I think that's quite important. That's the end of the slides. It's 10 o'clock. I've got a couple more videos to look at. This is one just from our policy launch. I think we might have some other videos to publish from that. Campaign launch in Glasgow. So just have a quick look at this.
Now, you'll hear Rishi Sunak to say, oh, I know what a woman is. Keir Starmer doesn't know what a woman is. Really? What's Rishi Sunak's definition of a woman? What's the Conservative Party's definition of a woman? I'll tell you what it is. It's adult human female or a man with a certificate from the government. What's the Alba Party's definition of a woman? It's adult human female or man with a certificate from the government. What's the Reform Party's definition of a woman? It's adult human female or man with a certificate from the government. I mean, can they not see that they're not getting to the heart of the matter? Our policy: pull up transgender ideology by the roots, repeal the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, and then we can start restoring sanity in our nation. And that policy is unique to the Scottish Family Party. So,
okay, you get the idea. And now, part of the reason I play that, I was listening to the radio today, and there was a commentator talking about the Conservative Party manifesto that was launched today. It was fairly bland, to be honest, but we were talking about it. And this commentator was saying that their manifesto lacked punch. It didn't have anything that really grabbed you and made you think, oh, wow, they've really got a grip of that issue. That's going to sort it out. And the commentator actually said, why didn't they put in repeal the 2004 Gender Recognition Act? And it just made me wonder, I wonder if that idea floating around the ether now actually started from the Family Party. Because when we made that our policy, I'd never heard anyone suggest that. That just seemed a completely original policy. But we've banged on about it quite a lot. And I just wonder if people have started picking it up. Because I've heard other people talking about it since then. I think it might be another example where the Family Party got the ball rolling on an idea and then it's gathered momentum.
And I think something that we really do in this Westminster campaign is to break the taboo on subjects. So, when it came to standing up on the issue of trans ideology, there were very few people who were willing to stand up and say, that a woman's an adult human female. A man can't become a woman. I couldn't see anyone else actually making that statement that a man can't become a woman. And I think in this campaign, we're going to speak up on abortion. We're going to speak up on, say some things that you probably haven't heard said in a public way, but hopefully that enables others to speak up on this issue and to raise their voices. And once that silence and that taboo has been broken, then we'll maybe hear other parties starting to speak and things like that as well. Yeah.
Right, I've got one last little video to show. Now, this video is a campaign video from the Labour Party. And the reason I'm showing you is I think it's completely out of order. I think it's like, online bullying of a kid at school. It's trivial. It's personal. I heard someone say once, in political campaigning, you should never steal someone's dignity, which I think is maybe a good point. Because I think some campaign posters, materials, they do steal the dignity. Like, remember the SNP did one with a photograph just of Boris Johnson's hair sticking up at the bottom of the poster. I think that's out of order. That's stealing someone's dignity. It's personal. It's below the belt. And this one from Labour, I think, is absolutely in the same category. It's like showing, Rishi Sunak didn't catch a ball. Rishi Sunak didn't look very good at football. Things like that. I think it's just, I think they should be embarrassed that they're putting this sort of thing out. And again, it makes me think, in the family party, I think we maintain higher standards. But strangely, I've never heard anyone say, the Labour Party, I mean, the way they campaigned, the way they made that video about Rishi Sunak, that was below the belt. That was really personal. I'm through with the Labour Party. I've never heard anyone say that. If we made a video like that about a politician, which was just a trivial mocking attack, there were people queuing up to say, that's very nasty. That's really appalling. It just shows what the family party is like. No, can't possibly associate with them. Anyways, have a look. This is what they put out.
You work in business. Do you want some fruit? I'm homeless. I have friends who are aristocrats. I have friends who are upper class. I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class.
I'm a Coke addict, total Coke addict, Coca-Cola.
Well, train was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Hello. I've been got some pretty good food that apparently you ordered.
We actually haven't.
You're kidding me? For regular chicken cats?
No, they're not ours. Yeah, I'm vegan.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved.
Anyway, what do you think? You agree with me, or do you think that's just a bit of fun?
You might get that from somewhere within the party. And I think that when you're campaigning on something, then is that their head office that's done that? Or is it?
Yeah, that's the official Labour Party X feed.
Yeah. Are they retweeting something, or is that something they produced?
No, they made it. They made it themselves. Their team has put that together and published it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
What's anyone else think? Are you with me, or am I being oversensitive on that? I just think it's trivializing. I mean, how do you respond to that? So if you're from another party and someone does something like that, what do you think? You think, right, we're going to get some embarrassing footage. It's like with politicians. You can often get a photograph of them with a really weird expression on their face, or from the worst possible angle or whatever. And I think using that sort of thing, I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's it doesn't help in any way at all, and it doesn't contribute anything to political debate. It does help as well. Does it help their campaign? I don't know. I would say I don't care if it does or not. It just doesn't seem right to me. It just seems like school kid taking the mickey, bullying type.
I mean, I feel like the Labour and Conservative campaign's so flat and dull, that what can they do? you know.
I think with Labour, that's their strategy. It's like the Joe Biden strategy.
Hmm.
Just be really dull and boring. I think we'd see a different side. We will see a different side of them when they're elected.
Yeah,
that's for sure. I think the ideology will shine through.
Cards are close to their chest at the moment.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, like the decriminalisation of abortion, that's been at Westminster. That's been pushed by Labour MPs, and when Labour MPs are totally dominating, I think it's very likely.
What can you do that's not in your manifesto? You know,
like manifestos are not legal commitments. You can put what you like in them.
But you know, can you just say whatever you want to get elected and then do whatever you want in?
Yes. Basically, I was talking about this last week. I think maybe there should be some sort of organization that monitors election pledges, and there's some sort of penalty if you don't fulfill them. I think that it's really necessary, because you can just promise the earth to anyone. Like the SNP giving free laptops to 16, 17-year-olds or whatever it was. Then they just don't do it. I think there's got to be a price to pay, because basically you're cheating, aren't you? You're not being honest. You're cheating, and there needs to be a penalty. Now, if you promise something, and let's say, I don't know, there's a pandemic or some sort of natural disaster or whatever, or a war, and you can't quite do it. Well, I would say even with that, your promise, you need to put small print with it. You need to say, this is what we plan to do. All things being equal, if some disaster comes along, we might not be able to do it, but this is what we would like to do. So it would just make them be realistic. It would stop them making, well, they're not rash promises, they're dishonest promises. Because the game soon deteriorates. And it's probably the electorate's fault as well. If you get an electorate that can be successfully appealed to on the basis of these sort of giveaways and promises.
But can you have just a completely different agenda? So you put a few popular things in your manifesto, be kind to dogs, etc. And then once you're in, you have your real policies, which are just undermining freedoms and
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think generally in manifestos, the parties, they like to stay away from the hyper progressive stuff. It's like, they haven't turned their logos rainbow for Pride Month. They don't want to be talking about assisted suicide and abortion up to full term. They don't want to talk about that, but they'll want to talk about it from the day after the election. And that's the way that things work. So they know what they want to talk about, and they know what they don't want to talk about. So they gear it according to that. I mean, the way you put it there, it's really stark, isn't it? But yes, you can promise anything and do completely the opposite. I guess the theory would be in a democracy, the opposition would point that out, and you'd pay the price next time round.
5 years' time.
You would hope.
You get a binary decision in the other direction,
Yeah. But then who's going to remember?
The other lot who are doing probably the same thing.
Yeah. So what do you think of my idea, though, of having some sort of agency that you submit your manifesto to them, and they track to see if you fulfill it over the next 5 years? And if you don't, you pay a penalty. Like if you say within the first year, we're going to increase the number of nurses by 6,000, then I think if you don't do it, you should lose 5 MPs or something. I don't know. Just you've got to pay a political penalty. A fine's no good. You've cheated. You got MPs elected by cheating. So they need to be under threat. Maybe have by-elections in 5 marginal constituencies that party had won or something. I think that would really liven politics up. What's anyone else think? Is that a good idea? Having the manifesto checking agency. What it would do, it would stop the parties making these promises. It would make them word them in a way that it was an aspiration, and that would be more honest. And so that would be a positive thing on its own. Right. I think that's all my. Is that all the slides done? I think, yep, that's all the slides done. We have been through everything. Thank you for your comments this evening. I know we've put quite a few on the screen this evening. So we will see you next week. We'll probably have an X space at some point before too long as well. Do keep an eye open on X.
Yeah, maybe we should do something along with the broadcast. So we have 2 broadcasts coming up. And
good idea.
we should do a live stream or an X space or both, just as those things happen, I think that would be quite interesting, because I'm sure that if we stuck something up on our website, lots of people go through to our website, and then to have something live happening at that time might be
or even we could do an X space. Could even do YouTube and Facebook live stream like this as well at the same time.
Yeah, maybe do it all.
Meet the masses as they come and investigate us to see what this unusual party is all about. Right, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for watching, those of you watching now, and there are many more who will watch later. And we will see you next week. So thanks, Phil.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.